Hey guys, sorry that I'm not able to be there with you today. I'm making this video so that you can correct your practice test questions 1 through 15. This is going to be probably a pretty long video because I'm going to work through each of them. But what you should do is check your answers first and then just fast forward to the ones that you needed help on. So let's go ahead and get started. Taking a look at the first two, we have a hint there. Hint, use GCF. Remember, we should always try to use the greatest common factor first, and those notes are in your booklet on page 2. So I'm going to work both of these using our greatest common factor because they do in fact have one. So as I look here, I see that my x is common. So my GCF is going to include the x. And remember, when you're picking your greatest common factor, you're always going to choose your smallest exponent. So it's going to be x squared. And let me backtrack real quick. My numbers are 1 and 4, so my GCF there is just 1. Now, to factor out the GCF, remember what we are doing is the opposite of distributing. So this is going to look like x squared times something. And to get that something, I'm going to divide each term by my GCF. So I'm going to divide each term by x squared in this case. So x to the 6th divided by x squared is x to the 4th minus, and then 4x squared divided by x squared, the x squareds are going to cancel, so I'm going to get 4. Now, I should mention that this can actually be factored further. I can factor that down to a difference of squares thing, but we're not going to worry about it right now because we're more concerned with our quadratics, our x squareds, than with our x to the 4th. We'll do this one in the future, very near future. Okay, so we're going to call that done. Let's take a look at number 2. So number 2 is a little bit longer. It looks more complicated, but my steps are the same. Okay, so I'm going to start with my GCF. So hopefully you can look at this and see 5, 25, and 250. 5 goes into all of those. And I know it can't be bigger than 5 because your GCF can never be bigger than your smallest number. Then I look at the b squared, b, the third term has no b, so b is not common, not part of my greatest common factor. Looking at the k, I have k squared, k squared, k squared, so k squared is common. Now I'm going to factor that out. So again, when I'm factoring using the GCF, I'm going to have the GCF times something, and to get that something, I'm going to divide by 5k squared, because that's my GCF. Here we go. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. B squared is going to stay b squared. K squared divided by k squared is 1. Plus 25 divided by 5 is 5. K squareds cancel out. Minus 250 divided by 5 is 50. K squareds cancel out. Let me backtrack. Look, I forgot my b in that middle term. There should be a b there. I wasn't paying attention to my details. I knew something was wrong, by the way, because these ended up being like terms, and that shouldn't happen. Okay, so that is factoring using our greatest common factor. Again, that should be the first thing that you try every single time. Let's move forward to our next method, next few problems. So 3 and 4, it says hint, use grouping. Our grouping is in our booklet on page 3. Grouping to me is the easiest one because what's happening with grouping is I have 4 terms. And if I'm using the box method, which is the method I prefer you use, I've got 4 spots in the box. So I'm going to draw the box. I am going to put each term in the box. Remember, it's important that the highest degree goes first, the lowest degree goes last. The other 2, it really doesn't matter. So I have 8r cubed minus 64r squared plus r minus 8. Now I'm going to go to each row and each column and pull out the greatest common factor. So my first row, I'm looking here, 8r cubed and negative 64r squared. Since that's my row, it's going to go out here. 8 and 64 has 8 in common. They also have r in common, and I'm going to choose my smallest exponent. Using my first column, so this time I'm looking at 8r cubed and r. Since that's the first column, it's going to go there, and they just have r in common. You can put 1r if you want to. Going to my second column, so I'm looking at negative 64r squared and negative 8. So I'm going to get negative 8, no r because this one doesn't have an r, the negative 8. And then lastly, my last row, r and negative 8, they just have 1 in common. No r in common, this one doesn't have an r. Remember to re-multiply to check yourself. You're going to find little mistakes when you do that. So 8r squared times r is 8r cubed. 8r squared times negative 8 is negative 64r squared. 1 times r is r. 1 times negative 8 is negative 8. So my answer here is 8r squared plus 1, that's from right there, times r minus 8, that's from right there. And that is all there is to grouping. Put each term in its box, and then pull out the greatest common factor of each row, each column. Let's take a look at number 4. The numbers here are kind of big, so it might take you a minute if you haven't been practicing. It might take you a minute to find your GCF, and that's okay. Use your calculator if you really must. So I'm going to draw the box, 4 terms. That's how I know I'm using the box method, grouping. So I have 24x cubed, 56, negative 64x squared, and negative 21x. All right, here we go. So first row right here. 24 and 64, 8 goes into both of those. If you need to list the factors of 24, 3, and then see which of those also go into 64, that would be 8 is the biggest one, then do that. The x is common, and choose the smallest exponent, which is x squared. Now the first column. Little trick here. If you're having trouble finding your GCF between 24 and 21, do 24 divided by 8, which is going to give us 3. And then check to see if that's our greatest common factor, which it is. 3 goes into 24, 3 goes into 21. And they have x in common. Now, second column, so negative 64x squared and 56. Remember, if this box here is negative, this number out here is going to be negative. And again, if you're having trouble deciding what your GCF is, do 64 divided by 8 is 8. And then does 8 go into 64? Yes. Does 8 go into 56? Yes. And then to get my second row, if you're having trouble with your GCF, do 21 divided by 3 is 7. And does 7 go into 21? Yes. Does 7 go into 56? Yes. Let's do our re-multiply to check. So 8x squared times 3x is 24x cubed. 8x squared times negative 8 is negative 64x squared. 3x times 7 is 21x. Oops, right there. Look at that. I need negative 21x, so I need my 7 to be negative. If this is negative, this number here will be negative. And this is how you catch those mistakes. If I've been doing this for as long as I've been doing it and I still make mistakes, you will too. So you got to re-multiply to check. Negative 7 times negative 8 is a positive 56. So my answer here, 8x squared minus 7 times 3x minus 8. Just making sure I was still recording there because it had disappeared very quickly. All right, moving on to the next method. This method says hint use box with trinomials. And this is from your booklet on page 4. So those are the steps that you are going to be using for the next few problems, and actually for all of the next ones. I know I'm using that because it's a trinomial. 1, 2, 3, 3 terms. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to work probably not all of these. I don't know. We'll see how long the video gets. So again, we're going to use the box method here. So I'm going to draw the box. I'm going to put in my first and my last term. Now here's where it gets different. I don't have two terms in the middle, so I can't just plop two terms right there. So I have to follow the steps that are on page 4. I'm going to multiply A times C. Remember, those are coming from our standard form. A is in front of your x squared, C is your constant. So in this case, I'm multiplying 1 times 10, which is 10. Then I find factors of 10, that means multiplies to 10, that adds to my middle term, B, which is negative 11. So I'm going to start by multiplying or writing down everything that multiplies to 10. Then I need to think about my signs. Since I'm multiplying to a positive, my signs need to be the same. Since I'm adding to a negative, they both need to be negative. So I'm going to do negative 1 and negative 10, which works. So I'm going to put in my negative 1x, my negative 10x. And remember, these two add to that middle term. I'm sorry, negative 1 in, negative 10 in. They add to that middle term. So that's why this is legal, because I haven't changed my actual problem. Pulling out my GCF of each row, each column. I'm going to use a negative 1 there because that box is negative. And then a negative 10 there because that box is negative. I'm going to remultiply to check. N times n is n squared. N times negative 1 is negative 1n. Negative 10 times n is negative 10n. Negative 10 times negative 1 is 10. So my answer here, I got a little messy, n minus 10 times n minus 1. And that's number 5. Now I'm going to erase this to take a look at number 6. And here we go. You might have realized something weird happened with number 6, something that we haven't talked a whole lot about. Again, it's a trinomial, so I'm going to start with the box. Put my first and last term in. Then multiply first times last. So I want to multiply to 24, positive, and add to 2. So 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. Now before I do anything else, I need to think about my signs. Since I'm multiplying to a positive, my signs need to be the same. Since I'm also adding to a positive, they both need to be positive. Now, if I add these together, I'm going to get 25 here, so that doesn't work. 14, so that doesn't work. 11, so that doesn't work. And 10, so that doesn't work. What that means is that this is prime. Cannot be factored. So the same way numbers can be prime, 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, same way numbers can be prime, polynomials can be prime as well. This one is prime. Those of you that used 4 and 6, be careful, because my signs had to be the same. You had to make one of them negative in order to get to 2. And then that's not going to multiply to 24, it's going to multiply to negative 24. So this one is prime. By the way, this right here is your justification for prime. You cannot just tell me something is prime. You have to justify it by showing me that none of the factors work. Okay, I'm going to clear this one so we can look at number 7. And here we go. So number 7, it's another trinomial. So I am going to start by multiplying. Well, I'm going to start by drawing the box. First and last term. Multiply 1 times negative 56 is negative 56. I want to multiply to negative 56 and add to my middle term, which is negative 1. All right, so listing everything that multiplies to 56. 1 and 56. 2 goes. Use a calculator if you really must. 6, 3 does not go. 4 goes, 5 does not, 6 does not, 7 does, and then 8 would start repeating. Thinking about my signs, because I'm multiplying to a negative, my signs have to be different. Since I'm adding to a negative, my bigger one needs to be negative. And hopefully you can see right there, 7 and negative 8. So I'm going to do 7 and negative 8, but don't forget your x. Pulling out the greatest common factor of each row, each column. And then remultiply to check. I'm going to let you do that on your own. I just quickly did it in my head, so I know I didn't make any mistakes. So my answer is x plus 7 times x minus 8. Remember, it doesn't matter what order you put those in. If you're flip-flopped, that's okay, as long as the x plus 7 and x minus 8. Okay, we're almost halfway there. Let's take a look at number 8 and number 9. And what I'm going to do with number 8 and number 9 is just kind of get you started so that you can use your two numbers, find your two numbers, because that's the hardest part. So on number 8, if I multiply 1 times 18, I get 18. So I need to multiply to 18 and add to 11. So I get 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Since everything's positive, it's all going to be positive. And hopefully you see what you're going to use as your 2 and your 9. So go ahead and draw the box. Put your numbers in. For number 9, this time I'm going to be multiplying to a negative 18. Let me get that out of your way. So I'm going to multiply to a negative 18 and add to 3. So same numbers, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. This time, since I'm multiplying to a negative, my signs will be different. Since I'm adding to a positive, my bigger one will be positive. So negative 3 and 6 will be the two numbers that you use. Again, you still need to finish this. You need to draw the boxes, put your 4 terms in, pull out your GCF of each row and each column. All right, we're a little bit on the long side here, but that's okay. We're going to keep going. Let's do number 10. So in number 10, again, I have a trinomial. You'll notice on all the ones we've done so far, that leading coefficient, that first term, was 1. Our steps don't change when it's not 1. They stay the same. So I'm going to draw the box. I'm going to put in my first term and my last term. And then I'm going to start with my a times c. So I'm going to multiply 3 times negative 5, which is negative 15. Multiplying to negative 15 and adding to negative 2. Listing my factors. I know I'm fast at this. I'm fast at it because I practiced. So the only way you're going to get fast at it is to practice. Since I'm multiplying to a negative, my signs are different. Since I'm adding to a negative, my bigger number is negative. Hopefully you see there my 3 and negative 5 are what's going to work. So I'm going to put in 3p, negative 5p, and then pull out my greatest common factor from each row and each column. Don't forget the negative on this one. Remember, if that box is negative, that number is going to be negative. Do your quick remultiply to check. I just did it in my head. For the sake of time, I'm just going to go straight to my answer there. Remember, when you're factoring, what I'm giving you is inside the box. Your answer is what's outside the box. And that's number 10. Okay, I'm going to clear the ink here. And I'm going to just help you pick your numbers for 11 and 12. So for 11, you're of course are writing your original and you're going to show me all the work. I'm just going to help you pick your numbers because that's the hardest part. So 2 and negative 9 is negative 18. So I want to multiply to negative 18 and add to 3. We've done 18 a couple of times now, so we know those factors. Signs are going to be different because I'm multiplying to a negative. Since I'm adding to a positive, my bigger one will be positive. So my two numbers there will be a -3 and a +6. For number 12, you still need to finish number 11, so pause and finish it. For number 12, I'm going to help you pick your two numbers. 2 times -1 is -2. Don't forget the negative. That's very important. It's not going to work if you don't have the negative. And I want to add to 3. So 1 and 2 is the only thing. Now this is tricky because my signs have to be different. I can't do 1 and 2 to add to 3. It does add to 3, but it doesn't multiply to -2. Since I'm adding to a positive, my bigger one has to be positive. That's my only choice for multiplying to -2. 1 and 2, with one of them being negative. Since it doesn't add to 3, this one is also prime. This one is also prime. So that's your answer right there. This is your justification. So this is how you show your work for that answer. You listed all your factors and none of them worked. Okay, let's move on to number 13 and 14. So notice in number 13 and 14, I have a binomial, two terms. So what I'm going to do, since I am missing that middle term of the ax squared plus bx plus c, I'm missing the x. I'm going to plug a 0 in there. So I'm going to do 9x squared plus 0x minus 1. That way I can draw the box, put in the first and the last, and then do my a times c. So if I do a times c, I get -9. I want to multiply to -9 and add to 0. Since I'm multiplying to a negative, my signs will be different. And I'm going to use 3 and -3 because that adds to 0. So 3x, -3x, pulling out my GCF of each row and each column. I get 3x plus 1, 3x minus 1. Okay, I'm going to clear the ink. If you need more time, pause it. And we'll do number 14. Then we're almost done. Video didn't end up being as long as I thought it would be. All right, so again, in number 14, we are missing that middle term, so I'm going to put a 0 in there. So I am factoring 4x squared plus 0x plus 9. Drawing the box. 4x squared, 9. Multiplying first and last, I need to multiply to 36 and add to 0. Now some of you are already looking at that going, I can't do that. I'm going to list my factors and talk about why. But you are absolutely right. Okay, because I am multiplying to a positive, my signs have to be the same. And notice whether I do positive, positive, or negative, negative, there is no way to get 0. Because when you add and your signs are the same, you add and keep the sign. It's not like the last one where I could do 3 and -3. I can't do that. If you're thinking, ooh, I'll just use this. No, because that multiplies to a -36. This one is prime. Now, real quick, we talked about that difference of squares, subtraction with perfect squares. Notice this one is sum of squares. I'm adding with perfect squares. Sum of squares is always going to be prime. We can try to factor out a GCF. But if you can't do that, it's prime. You cannot do sum of squares. It's not going to work, ever. So prime is your answer. Okay, last one, and we're going to work it all the way through. So again, a trinomial. I check for GCF, there isn't one. I go first and last term. I should say 1 is my greatest common factor, because 1 is always common. Multiply first and last, so I'm multiplying to 4. Add to the middle, so I'm adding to -4. So 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. Thinking about my signs, I'm multiplying to a positive, so my signs have to be the same. Since I'm adding to a negative, they both have to be negative. So I'm going to use -2 and -2. So -2x, -2x, factoring out my GCF of each row and each column. Re-multiplying to check. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times -1 is -2x. 2x times -1 is -2x. -1 times -1 is 1. I get 2x minus 1 times 2x minus 1. You can also write it as 2x minus 1 squared. Either answer, perfectly acceptable. Okay, so our video ended up being about 25 minutes long. I know that was a little on the long side. Remember, you do have some that you have to finish on your own. I didn't work through every single one. If you have trouble with that, send me a note on Edmodo and I will help you out. Good luck.